Hey friends, tonight we return to a moment in time when the world was shifting, loudly, suddenly, and with little concern for those caught beneath the weight of its turning. You've likely heard the grand words before: liberté, égalité, fraternité. The banners, the storming of prisons, the speeches that echo through textbooks and memory. But tonight, we are not among the orators or the revolutionaries. We are not at the podium, nor the scaffold. But before we get into it, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this kind of slow, sleepy storytelling. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always oddly comforting to see who else is curled up in the dark, listening from the other side of the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let your muscles soften a bit. Let your breathing settle, because in just a few moments, you'll be waking up in Paris. The year is 1793. The king is gone. The republic is new. And you? You're just trying to make it through the day without saying the wrong thing in public. You live in Paris, but not in a grand home near the boulevards, not in a well-lit apartment with paintings and silverware. Your home is a single room, above a bakery that now smells more of soot than of flour. The walls are damp, the windows draughty, and the floor creaks with every step. You wake before the sun, not because you must, because you're cold. The stove went out hours ago, and there's little fuel left. You huddle under a worn blanket, but your nose and fingers are already stiff. You rise slowly, your breath visible in the morning air. Your breakfast is a chunk of yesterday's bread, mould spotted but salvageable. You scrape off the worst of it with a knife that's grown dull. There's no butter, no jam, and certainly no coffee. Coffee is a luxury now. Everything is. You chew in silence, watching the light begin to touch the rooftops outside. The city is never still. Even in the early hours, carts rattle on the cobblestones. Vendors shout too early. Children cry in distant rooms. And beneath it all, the sense that something, someone, is always watching. You dress in clothes that no longer fit quite right. A patched coat. Shoes with soles that flap slightly when you walk. Everything smells faintly of smoke and boiled onions, no matter how often you try to wash it. Downstairs, your landlord waits. You avoid him when you can. Rent is due, and coin is scarce. He looks at you not with anger, but with resignation. You are one of many tenants falling behind. He no longer bothers to threaten. The revolution has made money uncertain and eviction risky. You nod to each other in passing, saying nothing. On the street there is noise, always noise. Posters pasted on walls, men with red sashes, women arguing in the marketplace over bruised apples and weak cabbage. The price of bread has changed again. It always does. No one seems to agree on the numbers, but everyone agrees that it's too high. You hear a name whispered, someone who said something foolish at the wrong time. A cousin who spoke well of the Queen, even if only out of habit. He hasn't been seen in 2 days. No one knows if he's gone, or just hiding. But no one asks too loudly. You pass by the local Jacobin club. The doors are open, the crowd already forming. Someone is giving a speech. You don't listen. You've heard so many speeches about justice, about virtue, about enemies of the people. They blur together now, louder than church bells, more constant than prayer. In the square, a guillotine stands, clean, polished, ready. You try not to look at it, but your eyes are drawn all the same. The wood is darker now, stained by repetition. They clean it often. There is something almost ceremonial about it, though the crowds no longer cheer as much as they used to. Back home, you speak to your neighbour briefly. She nods, she smiles, but her eyes are tired. Everyone's are. You do not mention politics. You do not mention food. You talk about the weather or the noise. And then you return to your room. You eat your supper, another scrap of bread, this time dipped in thin broth. You light a candle but let it burn low. Wax is too dear to waste. And before sleep takes you, you say nothing aloud. You do not pray. You do not think of kings or republics. You think only of keeping your head down, and perhaps keeping your head at all. The sun is up now, but it doesn't do much to warm you. The sky's pale, the wind cuts through the narrow streets, and somewhere nearby a dog is barking at nothing. You leave your home again, stepping carefully down the slick stairs. Another tenant passes you, eyes averted. You don't greet each other. People don't say much these days. Not in hallways, not in markets, not unless they trust you completely. and trust has been in short supply since the revolution began. You don't have a job, not a real one. There used to be structure, roles, apprenticeships, but now everything is temporary. The baker you worked for was arrested last month. No one knows why. His shop was seized. The new owner doesn't need extra help, so instead, you wait near the market, hoping someone needs something lifted, carried, cleaned, or moved. If not, you go without pay. If you're lucky, you earn enough for a small loaf or a bowl of something warm. The market itself is a maze of rationing, arguments, and exhaustion. Prices are posted but change without warning. Coins are scarce, and paper money is increasingly worthless. Some vendors accept favours, some demand loyalty, others deal only in whispers, sliding goods to those with the right connections or the right armbands. There are queues for everything, for bread, for soap, for news. You wait, you listen. People are always talking but rarely saying anything useful. Someone jokes about Robespierre, quietly, nervously. The others nearby don't laugh. One of them walks away too quickly. You all notice, but pretend not to. That person might return with a soldier or with a list. You resume talking about the weather. You hear the word tribunal more than you'd like. You know people who've gone before one. Few return. There's a rhythm to it now, an accusation, a swift trial, a quiet march at dawn, a cart through the streets, then the sound of wood and something heavier, and then nothing. You try not to think about it too much. By midday, your stomach is already complaining. You trade a few hours of labour for a cup of weak wine and a plate of something hot. You don't ask what it is. You eat it slowly, savouring the warmth more than the flavour. A child nearby stares at your bowl. You hand her the last bite. The rest of the day blurs. You walk. You wait. You run errands for a neighbour too afraid to go out. You carry water. You avoid the loud crowds and the louder speakers. In the afternoon, a festival begins nearby, some new holiday decreed by the committee. You can't remember what it's for. There are banners, music, even a parade of sorts. But no one looks festive. The celebration feels like an obligation. People clap, but their hands barely move. You stay at the edge, watching. You're not in the mood to be seen. Later, you stop by a friend's door. You knock once, then twice. No answer. You wonder if he's just out, or if he's been taken. You don't knock again. As evening falls, Paris turns dim and strange. The lanterns flicker, the streets thin. You hurry home, past posters with bold red ink declaring new decrees, new enemies, new heroes. You no longer try to keep track. Back in your room, you peel off your coat. Your hands are raw from the cold and the lifting. You pour a small basin of water, chilled and metallic. You wash quickly, then wrap yourself in your heavy blanket. You lie down on your cot. It creaks beneath you. From the alley below, someone shouts. A dog barks, a child cries. Then slowly it all fades. You made it through another day. You did not say the wrong thing. You did not look the wrong way. You did not vanish. And that, for now, is enough. Now let's shift our focus. You've spent the day walking through revolutionary Paris, keeping your head low. But not everyone lived that way. Some walked taller, spoke louder, believed more deeply. One of those people was Maximilien Robespierre. His name would come to terrify even those who once cheered for him, but it didn't begin that way. He wasn't born into violence. He didn't crave control. He was, in fact, something quieter. A lawyer, a scholar, a man of ideas. Robespierre was born in 1758 in Arras, a provincial town in northern France. His mother died when he was young. His father disappeared soon after. Raised by relatives, Robespierre excelled in school. He earned a scholarship to study law in Paris, at the Lycée Louis le Grand, a place filled with books, ambition, and the early sparks of enlightenment. He read Rousseau, Voltaire, Montesquieu. But it was Rousseau who truly shaped him, especially the idea that the general will of the people must guide all law. That virtue was not simply moral behaviour, but a political necessity. Without virtue, freedom would rot. As a young lawyer, he was known for his integrity. He defended the poor. He avoided flattery. He rarely took bribes, even when it cost him. He didn't speak often, but when he did, people listened, carefully. When the revolution began in 1789, Robespierre was elected as a deputy to the Estates General. He was still relatively unknown. He wore simple clothes. He didn't interrupt. But he spoke often about the rights of man, about justice, and about the dangers of monarchy. He became known as the Incorruptible, At first his voice was one among many, but as the revolution deepened, spurred on by bread riots, the fall of the Bastille, and the growing fear of royalist plots, his words began to carry more weight. He argued against the death penalty. He argued against war with foreign powers, and eventually he argued against the king. Each time he stepped further out of the crowd. Each time he stood straighter. In 1791, as France stumbled toward constitutional monarchy, Robespierre warned that compromise would only lead to betrayal. He feared factions. He feared privilege. He believed that only a republic guided by virtue could survive. In 1792, the king was arrested. The monarchy was abolished. Robespierre stood firm in the National Convention, calling for a complete break from the past. No half measures, no leniency, only principle. He joined the Jacobin Club, the most radical, most powerful political group of the time. There, he debated, argued, and refined his message. France must be pure. France must be protected from corruption, from enemies within and without. He was not charismatic in the traditional sense. He didn't smile easily. He didn't command rooms with charm, but he was precise, controlled, righteous. And in times of fear, righteousness can become magnetic. By 1793, Robespierre was one of the most powerful men in France, not by seizing control, but by appearing above ambition. While others jostled for position, he simply repeated his principles, and yet his rise came not despite the revolution's chaos, but because of it. The streets were unstable, the economy strained, foreign armies approached from all sides, food was scarce, trust was rarer, people needed certainty, and Robespierre offered it not in action, but in purity. He joined the Committee of Public Safety, an ironic name for what would become the nerve centre of the Reign of Terror. But before the blood, before the lists, before the silence, there was still hope, still the belief that France could be reborn. Robespierre still believed in virtue, and believed absolutely that it must be enforced, quietly, systematically, without compromise. By 1793, the revolution had devoured the monarchy. But it was not satisfied. The guillotine had been introduced as a humane way to execute, a symbol of swift, equal justice. But now it began to appear more often, in more places, for more reasons. Robespierre did not invent the terror, but he helped justify it. He believed that the revolution was under threat, not just from foreign monarchies, but from within. That enemies of liberty were hiding in plain sight, in the press, in the streets, in the convention itself, and that these enemies had to be removed, cleanly, consistently, without favoritism. He spoke of virtue and terror as two halves of the same blade. Terror is nothing but prompt, severe, inflexible justice, he said. It is an emanation of virtue. Under his guidance, the Committee of Public Safety expanded its reach. Suspected counter-revolutionaries were arrested with minimal evidence. Trials were shortened. In many cases, a verdict was reached before a defence could be mounted. At first, the targets were obvious. Nobles, clergy, royalist sympathisers. Then it widened. Moderates, journalists, former allies, even fellow Jacobins who questioned the speed or the methods. To live in Paris during this time was to walk a narrow line. You must be vocal, but not too vocal. Loyal, but not blindly so. Revolutionary, but in precisely the right way. The law changed frequently. Suspicion was often enough. A neighbour's accusation could lead to arrest. A sarcastic comment overheard at a market could mean death. The prisons filled, the tribunals met daily, the guillotine worked tirelessly. In one 6-week stretch in the summer of 1794, over 1,300 people were executed in Paris alone. Each morning carts would rattle through the streets, carrying the condemned. Some wept, some prayed, some were silent. Crowds gathered less frequently now. The novelty had worn off. The fear had not. And yet Robespierre remained calm, detached. He believed he was saving the Republic, that a nation reborn in blood could become pure. He gave long speeches. He praised Rousseau. He condemned factions. He quoted moral philosophers as names were crossed off. But even as he preached unity, he grew increasingly isolated. He stopped attending social functions. He avoided many meetings. He surrounded himself with a few trusted allies and withdrew from most others. His enemies grew, quietly at first. Then suddenly, in July of 1794, year 2 by the revolutionary calendar, Robespierre gave a long, cryptic speech accusing unnamed conspirators in the convention. He would not say who, but he promised revelations soon. The next day, the convention struck first. They arrested Robespierre. His allies attempted a rescue. Shots were fired. Robespierre was wounded, possibly by his own hand. Accounts differ. His jaw was shattered. He was taken to the same tribunal that had condemned so many. There was no trial. There was barely even an accusation. On the 28th of July, he was led to the guillotine, his mouth bound in a bloodied cloth. The crowd watched in silence. The incorruptible was gone. The blade he sharpened had, at last, turned on him. In the days that followed, the execution slowed. The prisons emptied. The revolution continued, but its fever had broken. Robespierre's legacy remains complicated. A man of ideals who believed too completely. A defender of justice who embraced terror. A visionary undone by the very system he helped build. And somewhere in the city a bell tolled. A cart rolled down a quiet street, and Paris, exhausted, tried to sleep. Now we turn to a quieter story. One that unfolds behind stone walls, far from the noise of public squares and revolutionary slogans. A story not of speeches or battles, but of silence. Of a child lost in the middle of a collapsing world. The boy was born in 1785. His name was Louis Charles, but to many he was known simply as the Dauphin, the heir to the throne of France, the son of King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. He was born into luxury, dressed in silks, tutored by the finest minds, adored by courtiers, a child raised to rule, though he would never understand what that meant. At age 4, he became heir to the throne after the death of his older brother. At age 8, the revolution would take everything else. In 1792, when the monarchy was abolished and the royal family imprisoned in the Temple, an old medieval fortress turned jail, the boy entered a different kind of world. First, he was with his family. He stayed with his parents and his sister, reading, praying, listening to whispered conversations. There was little warmth, but there was still routine. Then, in January of 1793, his father was taken away. Louis XVI was executed by guillotine in the Place de la Révolution. The boy never saw him again. Months later, his mother was removed from the Temple. Marie Antoinette was led to a different prison, and eventually to the same fate as her husband. The child remained, alone. The revolutionaries called him Louis Capet, not Louis XVII. They did not want a prince. They wanted a symbol, a defeated monarchy, a final insult to the Ancien Regime. He was placed in the care of a man named Antoine Simon, a cobbler turned revolutionary guard. Simon had no experience with children, and certainly not with royalty. His job was not to teach, but to erase. The young Louis was cut off from his family, from books, from light. He was told to forget who he was, to renounce his parents, to sing revolutionary songs, to parrot back what he was told. He was kept in a small room, filthy and dark. The windows were barred. The air was thick. He became sick. He stopped speaking. His hair turned coarse. He scratched at his arms until they bled. There are few records from this time. Some guards said he was treated well. Others hinted at neglect, or worse. Most agreed he barely moved. When Antoine Simon was dismissed in early 1794, no one replaced him. For months the boy was left almost entirely alone. No books, no visitors, no comfort, and no name. He turned 9, then 10, and then he vanished. Not in a dramatic way. There was no great escape, no last sighting, just an absence in the records. In June of 1795 it was announced that Louis Charles, the Dauphin of France, had died in prison of illness. A small body was buried, no ceremony, no monument. But almost immediately questions began to surface. Had the boy truly died? Had he been smuggled out? Was the body even his? And if not, where had the lost King of France gone? The official account was simple. The boy had died on June 8, 1795, at the age of 10, in a dark prison cell. The cause, scrofula, a form of tuberculosis. The body, frail, pale, and nearly unrecognisable. He had been buried quietly with no surviving family present in a mass grave. No marker, no cross, no name carved in stone. Just another child lost in the chaos of the revolution. But almost from the beginning, people doubted the story. How had he died so conveniently? Just as foreign monarchies were negotiating for his release. Why had he been left alone for so long without care? And more curiously still, why had so many people claimed to see him alive after his supposed death? In the decades that followed, dozens of impostors would come forward, each claiming to be Louis XVII. Some had convincing details, others had scars, stories, or striking resemblances. One claimed to have escaped through bribery, another said he had been switched with a deaf-mute boy, a third told of a secret royalist network smuggling him out in a laundry cart. None of these claims were ever fully proven, but none could be definitively disproven either. The story of the lost Dauphin became a kind of national ghost story. Whispers in drawing rooms, murmurs in royalist circles, a faint hope that the monarchy through a single surviving child might still return. And what of the body? An autopsy was performed on the boy who died in the Temple prison. The doctor reported signs of disease, especially in the lymph nodes. But he also noted something strange. The child's frame, though malnourished, didn't match what some had expected. He seemed smaller, weaker. The body had no obvious identifiers. Still, the body was buried, and the story faded, at least for a time. Then, in the 1990s, modern science returned to the question. During the Revolution, the doctor who performed the autopsy had secretly preserved the boy's heart. Yes, the actual human heart. Dried, hidden, passed down through generations like a relic. It had changed hands many times. Some believed it a fraud, others a sacred piece of lost royalty. DNA testing had finally reached the point where such a claim could be tested. The heart was compared to DNA from living descendants of Marie Antoinette's family, through her maternal line. And the results? A match. The heart belonged to her child, which meant most likely that the boy who died in 1795 really was Louis Charles, the Dauphin. Not a replacement, not a mystery child, not a prince raised in secret exile. Just a sick, forgotten boy in a locked room. Still, some refused to believe it. The myth was stronger than the science. Even today books are written, debates continue, questions linger in quiet corners, but the facts, as they stand, are soft and still. A child. A cell. A silence that grew too loud to ignore. His sister, Marie-Thérèse, the only immediate family member to survive the revolution, would never speak publicly about his death. She lived into adulthood, across borders and exiles, and carried the weight of that silence with her. Louis XVII never ruled, never fought, never spoke on behalf of the revolution or against it. But in his absence he became a symbol of loss, of cruelty, of a monarchy that died not in defiance, but in slow, quiet decay. And somewhere beneath the streets of Paris a small heart once beat, then stopped, and for a long time no one knew if it had ever been real at all. So far you've walked the streets of Paris as a nobody, but now imagine the other side, not royalty, not nobility, but one of the new elite, a man with a title not inherited but earned or seized in the chaos. You're a delegate of the National Convention, a revolutionary leader, a public servant, a public figure, a public target. Your morning begins with paper, not breakfast, not rest, not silence. Paper. A stack of pamphlets slid under your door, hot off the presses, ink still smudging your fingers, reports, accusations, satire, political commentary printed by radicals, loyalists, and those who aren't sure what they are anymore. Your name appears in some of them. You scan quickly to see if you're still on the right side of things, if yesterday's applause hasn't soured into suspicion. You never know anymore. You rise and dress carefully. You wear the revolutionary sash, of course, red, white, and blue. It signals your allegiance, not to the crown, not to the church, but to the people. Though even that word, people, has begun to feel vague. Who are the people exactly, and how long until they decide you are no longer one of them? You leave your house quickly, but not casually. Every step in public is a performance. You nod at neighbours, speak loudly about justice, about bread, about the will of the Republic. Someone nearby is watching. There's always someone watching. At the convention building, the day begins with noise, debates, shouting, the scraping of chairs, the rustling of parchment, voices rising over one another, then falling quiet when the wrong name is mentioned. You sit in a row of delegates. Many of them are tired. Some look over their shoulders more than they speak. You remember when the revolution felt like a cause. Now it feels like a test you must pass every day with no notes and no second chance. In the afternoon, the accusations begin. They always do. Someone is called out, perhaps a former Girondin or a Montagnard who wavered. A letter is read, a quote repeated. There is a brief silence, then agreement. The accused is led out, often without protest. Sometimes they return, often they do not. You sip watered wine and write notes with a shaking hand. Not from fear, you tell yourself, just the cold, the draught in the hall, the tension in your shoulders. You give a speech, short and direct. You praise the revolution, you denounce corruption, you name no names, you flatter no one, you hope it is enough. In the late afternoon, you meet with a smaller committee, plans for food distribution, a discussion about currency. Everything feels fragile. No one speaks freely, but everyone speaks often. Someone asks about Robespierre. You answer carefully. Too much praise is dangerous. Too much criticism is worse. You change the subject. As the day ends, you walk home through streets that no longer feel familiar. The posters are new. The slogans have shifted. The same words, liberty, virtue, justice, painted in bolder colours. You pass the prison gates, they creak in the wind, you know someone inside, you pretend you don't, you arrive home, blow out the candle, sit in the dark for a long time, you are safe, for now. And tomorrow it begins again. Evening falls, you've spoken carefully today, you've voted correctly, you've applauded the right speeches and ignored the wrong ones. Now you are expected to dine. Because being revolutionary doesn't mean being hungry. Not if you're lucky. Not if you're connected. You arrive at the home of another delegate. One of your allies. Or at least someone who still pretends to be. The townhouse is modest by pre-revolutionary standards, but grand enough in the current climate. The walls are unadorned. No portraits, no gold. Nothing that might whisper of aristocracy. That would be dangerous. The table is long, lit with candles that sputter in the draught. The guests are all men like you, members of the convention, lawyers, soldiers, administrators. Some of them will be dead by the end of the year. No one knows who. You pass the wine carefully. The food is surprisingly good. Bread, fresh and warm, stew with real meat. A small dish of sweetened carrots, a fruit tart even. You chew slowly. You compliment the cook. You don't ask how they acquired sugar, it's better not to know. The conversation is light. On the surface. Someone tells a joke about royal wigs. A few guests laugh, but it's too loud, too eager. The silence that follows is longer than it should be. Someone else speaks about grain distribution, about the latest decree. You nod. You've read it, or skimmed it. You repeat a phrase you remember from Robespierre's last speech. Public virtue must nourish private virtue. Heads nod around you. No one comments further. One man drinks a little too much. He speaks a little too freely. He mentions someone who was arrested last week, a mutual acquaintance. He says the tribunal was too harsh. He says, too much. No one corrects him. No one argues. No one agrees. The topic shifts, but you all noticed. Later, as coats are gathered and cheeks are kissed, no one reminds him of what he said, but you know, and he knows, that someone will remember, and someone will report it. You walk home under a night sky with no stars. Clouds hang low over Paris. The streets are slick with damp cobblestone. A horse passes, pulling a cart with covered barrels. The driver doesn't speak. At the corner, a man in uniform watches you pass. He does not nod. He does not smile. You arrive home, remove your boots, pour a glass of wine, and sit by the window in the dark. You're not poor, you're not powerless, you're not forgotten, but you're not safe. Because tonight you dined well. But tomorrow, someone else might read your name, might call you a threat, and might wonder what you really meant when you raised your glass. And the next dinner might be quieter, smaller, missing a chair. And now, as the last candle burns low and the noise of the day fades behind thick stone walls and shuttered windows, we return to stillness. You've walked through the streets of revolutionary Paris. You've shivered in a freezing room with mouldy bread. You've watched a speech twist into a sentence. You've stood beside a child prince who was forgotten before he could grow. You've dined at a table where laughter carried the weight of fear. You've seen how hope and horror lived side by side, day after day, in a city that called itself free. The French Revolution changed the world, but not always in the ways it promised. For many, it wasn't an awakening. It was a slow, confusing undoing. The days were filled with questions and the answers often came too late. There were no clean lines, no good versus evil. Just people, confused, hungry, angry, hopeful, living moment to moment, trying to survive something bigger than themselves. And yet in the silence that followed, something remained. France did not return to what it was. It could not. The old world was gone, the new one was uncertain, but it existed. The guillotine stopped, the slogans faded, the tribunals disbanded, and Paris went on. And so did the people who once whispered and watched and waited. Tonight you drift in a different time. There are no bread lines, no tribunals, no cart rolling past your window, only quiet, only breath, only the soft memory of a time when simply staying silent, staying small, and staying unseen was the surest path to survival. You can rest now. The revolution is over, and you made it through the night. Sleep well.